Hello there, and welcome to the final part of November 4th's comic book reviews. We did DC in the first part, Marvel in the second, and in this part we're just going to wrap up with the rest of the books that I picked up this week, starting with We Stand on Guard, issue 5, the penultimate issue of this limited series by Brian K. Vaughan. All of these issues, actually, this video kind of seem to pass really quickly. Just that they don't feel that, meaty for some reason. I don't know why. But we start on a prisoner farm in America, a POW farm, sort of thing, where we find out that Thomas, Amber's sister, is still alive. He has been held captive by the Americans, and he runs into the chief on this farm, where he tells her that he has some plans, some underground guerrilla stuff in the works, which will definitely pan out by the end of next and last issue. As Amber, meanwhile, in Canada, kind of goes off the deep end with her revenge against Americans, she luckily gets a quick save from the cavalry as Kabani comes to the rescue with a hijacked U.S. military machine thing. And then after this, the freedom fighters plan their final assault on the American military. Their suicide mission of sorts. Backs against the wall, the entire force of the U.S. military basically on them, and they realize that the reason that they just haven't been bombed to oblivion yet is because that they're sitting on top of a very large arsenic deposit that, if the Americans just blew up, would infect all of the water that they're trying to steal. And so our freedom fighters decide this is the best chance we're going to get to kill some Americans, and they go for it. They hijack more American tanks and planes, and just go in guns blazing, going just, backs against the wall, Hail Mary sort of mission, landing right on the Americans' mobile base, and again, just preparing for their final hurrah, so to speak. And that's basically it. It's, again, we're reaching the end. This is just the beginning of the end, both for our story and our freedom fighters. Again, not much really going on besides that. Thomas, of course, adds a wrinkle to the story, and I'm excited to see how that pans out in the final issue. But this one, pretty much just setting up the finale. And, you can't really complain. It's a limited series. It's, that's how stories work, I suppose. So, We Stand on Guard. Okay. Next up, also by Brian K. Vaughan, is Paper Girls, issue number 2. I like the first issue a lot. I just really like what they were setting up. And this continues it very, very nicely. We begin catching up with our alien monster guys, who might not be aliens, as there's a weird crack in the sky, and the guy who stole all the machinery is ambushed by, we'll find out what this is later. He's ambushed by this weird alien-looking thing, and drops all of his stuff, and we see that in his bag, amongst the walkie-talkie, is all these other weird things from all sorts of different times, including a cell phone that's way too small for 1988, a cell phone that's a little too big for 1988, and even an iPad over there, which corresponds very nicely with the Apple device that they found at the very end of the last issue, which I didn't spoil. But our heroes, through all this, find themselves alone and abandoned in Ohio. They're still not sure exactly what's going on, but they're unable to contact the police, and they can't find any adults, so it's up to them to save the town, or at least survive, or whatever. Very 80s movie setup, and of course, with all the cell phones that I showed you previously, I mean, I just thought of E.T. They're gathering phones to, phone home, like E.T. did, whatever. But yeah, the girls make their way to Mackenzie's house because Mackenzie has a gun, and along the way they run into some weird shit, including a bunch of like pterodons or I mean, these aren't pterodactyls because they don't have like the weird ruddered head sort of thing, but some sort of flying dinosaur thing along the way. But they make their way to Mackenzie's house where they find one more survivor, and then have to deal with them joining the party or whatever. But yeah, I'm really liking Paper Girls. It's super 80s movie. Yeah, no, it's like you just have the girl gang, aliens or time travelers, considering the stuff in the bag that we see. And also a bunch of some of the girls think, oh, maybe they're time travelers, so it comes up in story too, besides that one battle. And it's just, yeah, it's just super fun. I could totally see this being an adaptation of, again, like an E.T. or a Goonies or something. And so if you like those sorts of stories, if that's in your alley, if you love the Goonies, if you love E.T., Close Encounters, any of that, I think Paper Girls, again, right up your alley, and just super fun book. Next up, we have a book I'm also very excited for, James Bond 007, written by Warren Ellis. And, I mean, this is just a natural sort of thing. Warren Ellis on James Bond fits like a glove, and this book is just so essentially James Bond. We start with, like, the first act of this book, the whole first third of this issue, is a Bond cold open, as Bond is chasing this guy through Helsinki. They get into a fight in the snow with some shovels. It's just, like, you can imagine this being the first 5-10 minutes of a Bond movie. It just fits so well, and the pacing and all that reminded me a lot of Warren Ellis's run on Moon Knight very recently, over at Marvel. So if you liked his Moon Knight series, this opening bit it comes right out of that, but it still feels entirely James Bond. It's very cool up until the final part of this, where James Bond reveals why he's after this guy and delivers, you kill 008, I'm 007. You have like, if this were a movie, this would be the barrel, where you have the barrel following Bond, and then ba-da, ba-da-da-da-da, and all that. Like, just so it's just ideal Bond. It's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I will admit to really, like, James Bond 007, that whole franchise is one of the most problematic things, like, just in media, but I enjoy it so much. There's just something, like, primevally cool about the James Bond franchise. I want to say in spite of all of the problems it has. It's this kind of essential male... I mean, it is like a pornography in a way, in that it's completely absurd. It's dangerous to want to do in real life. Like, if you wanted to be James Bond in real life, you would be crazy. And not just because it's dangerous, just because, like, the unrealistic expectations of character that James Bond presents. But at the same time, to be him, like, would be very gratifying in a very cardinal way. So yeah, I enjoy James Bond, and from this it seems that Warren Ellis does too. This really is classic Bond. You have the banter with Moneypenny. You have the dialogues with M in his office, where M reminds Bond that he's a much better murderer than he is a spy. because James Bond is a terrible secret agent. We get a quick stop at Q's office, where instead of giving Bond a weapon, he takes Bond's gun away because of some new legal red tape involving the 00 program, and then sends Bond off to his mission in Berlin, which involves a drug ring. So not a lot of setup. Basically, they're setting up James Bond, Berlin, no gun, drug bust. That's kind of the story we're getting so far. But it has all the trappings of James Bond. If you like the movies, it's very, very cinematic. In his newsletter, Warren Ellis said that he's going for more James Bond of the books, who, from my experience, is a lot, super duper, a lot more racist and just, a terrible person, but also has moments of, deep sadness and introspection that the movies kind of glossed over until some of the Daniel Craig stuff. So it should just be very interesting. If you like James Bond, I totally recommend it, because it is the Bondiest book. I really liked Grayson, the DC Dick Grayson book, which obviously takes a lot of cues from the James Bond franchise, but this is pure James Bond in comic book form. Warren Ellis just, again, fits like a glove, the right writer for the right media property. So super duper excited for the rest of this book. And one more book I picked up this week. It's not a new book, but the author / artist was signing at my local comic book store, and it just seemed really charming, so I picked it up and really enjoyed it. Henchgirl, issue number 1. I think issue number 2 is out, but not in color. There's a black and white version of the issue out. Meanwhile, this is in color. So if you're waiting for that, I think the color should come out in a few weeks or something for issue number 2. But this book is just very, very cute, very charming. Immediate first thoughts just from the art style, and I think it's if you read enough comics, you immediately jumped also to Scott Pilgrim, and it does have that sort of kind of self-published indie sort of feel that that Scott Pilgrim did, and it's very similar. It seems in tone, in mood, and all that. But instead of following a terrible 23-year-old boy, this book follows a henchgirl who, pretty self-explanatory. She is a goon for a supervillain and has to pay her bills and live with some roommates and stuff like that. It is, very much Scott Pilgrim if Scott Pilgrim were a female goon instead of a fuckboy. So, very charming, very cute book, and I added it to my poll because I figure, what the hell, support a very kind of up and coming artist, and it's super cute, and I really enjoyed it. Very funny, and it's a good premise. So, Henchgirl number 1 gets my recommendation, and that is it for this week in comic books. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please rate it. If you want to, please subscribe. That makes me feel better about this whole video thing. Any comments, questions, anything whatsoever, please leave them below and I will try and get to them. Thank you for watching this video. If you watched the previous 2, thank you for watching those also, and I hope that you will join me next week for some more comic book reviews.